couple very interesting events have happened this last week. The first one is the first time in 6 months Donald Trump has a press conference, which maybe wouldn't seem so out of the usual otherwise, except it's been a long time. But this was not like press conferences that we're used to. Glad you covered this well. How is this different?
Yeah, in his first press conference as president-elect. I think it's good to start with what was going on in the days leading to this, because of course it was BuzzFeed releasing these 35 documents, part of a dossier that was presented, according to sources, to him during an intelligence briefing, and also to President Obama. But that set off, that's how this press conference started, was with talking about BuzzFeed and fake news. They're very upset that this was released. And then they also lumped in CNN, whereas CNN would say their report was very different. They did not release these 35 documents, but they did talk about the existence of the documents and who they were presented to.
Is that a true distinction?
They actually also confirmed, CNN, that a summary of that dossier was discussed at the intelligence briefing with President Obama and President-elect Trump. So CNN did a very important piece of reporting in connecting something that was just out there as a potential dossier on the president-elect, and turning it into something that was real, that had been discussed. And Trump and his people are not disputing that he got that 2-page summary, and he himself has said he looked at it later. So it is a distinction.
So explain why he went after CNN. All of a sudden, that's a fake news channel.
Explain Donald Trump.
In 30 seconds, please.
Yes, yes.
We've been waiting.
Well, the explanation is he's very volatile, and he was obviously upset by that. We've seen it over and over again. Anything that seems to challenge his election, he wants to re-emphasize over and over. I won big. The reason he gave for not releasing his tax returns at this news conference was, I won. Nobody cares. Well, those two things are not mutually exclusive.
That is true.
But other news organizations knew about the documents and didn't do anything with them. And I think that's where it's hard for CNN. It wants to distance itself from BuzzFeed, but if you read the CNN article, you went and wanted to find the documents, right? Because you knew they were out there somewhere. And so CNN pointed people to the documents, and that's where I think Trump was upset.
But so did the New York Times, so did other major news outlets, because of that connection.
To the intelligence briefings that no one's denying.
It was discussed. So you can argue about whether it's something that can be verified. I think everyone has also been very careful in the media to say these haven't been substantiated. So I'm not sure exactly what the media is supposed to do in this case.
You would say that CNN, New York Times, they did it right in this particular case?
Well, I think they did what they had to do in terms of reporting, and I thought it was very interesting to follow the farewell speech by President Obama, a very dignified speech, laying out 8 years that while there was no shortage of controversy, there also wasn't any scandal. To go from that to a press conference where reporters were being mocked, were being criticized as providing fake news.
How is what President-elect Trump did with CNN different than what President Obama did with Fox?
That is an excellent point. The Fox News situation occurred shortly after Obama took office, and reported, by the way, by all the media outlets covering the Trump press conference. He tried to exclude Fox News from opportunities for interviews, questioning whether they were a legitimate news organization. The media banded together and said, no, you can't make those kinds of judgments. That's not your role. So we need to see the same thing here.
One quick comment till we get to our
And
legislature.
that's the difference this time, is that we're not seeing the media totally banding together on what's going on here. I think this is just uncharted territory. No one would want what happened to CNN to happen to them in that meeting. And so people, I think they're trying to figure out this new reality, because this press conference was different. We had an attorney speaking, we had kind of like an intermission, and we had people on the sideline clapping. So it was just a very different situation than what the White House press corps is probably used to.
So, Senator, start for you a second. One of the big issues coming up this next legislative session is potentially legislation on medicinal use of marijuana. Right. Where do you see that legislation going, and what do Utahns think about that idea?
You know, I think Utahns are right in the middle on it, and so a responsible bill that truly dealt with medical need, I think, would receive broad support among Utahns. But I don't think the legislature is there. With Senator Madsen, who championed that in the past, stepping out, no longer being in the body. Last night I met with a group that they're in favor of medical legalization. They are just really worried that something might pass that actually is a step backwards. So it'd be a step backwards where people could say, look, we did something, they're not happy with it, they're never happy, they want full legalization. So I don't think we're going to see anything terribly good come out of this session.
What does leadership think?
Well, Utah House Speaker Greg Hughes told a group at the Utah Taxpayers Association conference earlier this week that he thinks this will be the biggest issue of the session. And he brought up something that I thought was really interesting. He spoke about the connection between the opioid abuse in the state, not just in Utah, but it's certainly a concern here as well as the rest of the country, and medical marijuana. And I don't know, is that something that can be used to limit maybe the use of medical marijuana, but at least introduce it for those people who feel they need it?
Well, there's a direct correlation. I mean, opioid abuse is huge in Utah, and so if people could medicate with marijuana, which, you know, there's just no comparison in the harm those things can do an individual, we probably would see some of the opiate abuse decrease. But I don't think we have a real champion of legalization in the
It's
legislature.
just not there now. Okay, last comment.
Yeah, but I think that's right, without a real champion, because what it almost gets to every time is, oh, well, we need more research. And, you know, or we just get to a point where there is some support, but without a real champion, everyone can fall back on, you know, we agree to an extent, but we want to study it, and that's where it could be. And education may surpass that as the number one issue in what we've seen in the last few days.
I think that's absolutely right.
Definitely could be. All right, thank you. Very insightful. Thanks for spending a minute on these two very important parts of the week.